How are you?
I'm okay. I jumped on yesterday. I don't know if you started earlier than I thought. Was it a short meeting yesterday?
It was a short meeting, yeah,
Ah, yeah.
only because people didn't turn their camera on and we'd finished with everybody.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm joking. I did mention you, but you didn't. You must have weren't there, or you would have
I mustn't have
responded.
heard. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we had a talking with Maya about the same kind of thing that we talk about with you. You know what's that thin line yet to cross?
yeah. I was watching. Oh, I can't think of her name. Some woman teacher, Lisa Cairns. That's it. She did a video today. You're already awake, but it was the usual. You're already awake, but you don't know you are. So, uh, yeah,
One of the things that Maya responded to that might be of value to you was Marius's suggestion that she try it on, even though it's fake. Try it on. Try on the idea that I'm already awake, and just when that thought turns up, obviously it shifts your perspective. So you start looking from the place of somebody who is awake. You don't know how that is until you're awake, but essentially it takes you out of the old perspective uh, for a moment at least, and gives you an opportunity to discover a possible new one.
yeah. Yeah, and I think not that I tried that, but I think that was happening at some points, maybe months ago in these conversations, and it would actually bring up various different emotions. When I might speak about something or chime in on a topic or give a bit of advice, and then there'd be a sort of a self-reflection, or if somebody said something, there might be um, guilt, anger, shame. It would bring up emotions. I suppose it is a handy one to kind of move away from the continuous wall of doubting all the time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So I mean, this is a fairly gross statement, but essentially it works, and that is that doubt is not something that you're going to fix. Doubt, doubt. I mean, that's like using the mind to fix the mind. Doubt is in the mind, and no matter what you do, you're never going to correct it. All you're going to do ever with doubt is get bored with it.
yeah,
So you don't try and fix it. You just try and live with it. It is always just a story.
yeah. And something someone else said at one of the meetings recently, it kind of struck me. Maybe it was one of the videos I watched. If I wasn't at it, I always watch the videos anyway, Vince, if I'm not at them. And someone said something about, the basically was around the one thing you don't want to do. And that really struck me that I suppose the one thing I don't want to do is stop seeking. It's the one thing I don't want to do. Um, so it seems like that's the one thing
That's it. That's
I need to try to do or do. And this week, I had a real quiet, relaxing week. I took the week after Christmas off, so I've never slept so much in my life in the last week. And it's been the most loveliest sleeps. For a long time, I couldn't sleep early in the morning. Like I'd wake up early and you just can't go back to sleep. And for whatever reason, it's like I'm 18 again and I could just sleep all through the morning and all day. And I've been doing a lot of that. So
Yeah, I would imagine that you need it if it's there like that. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah,
there's a lot of body repair going on or something. Yeah.
yeah. That could be part of it. Yeah, but definitely
So,
more peaceful, less angry and anxious. I think the lady at the last meeting suggested, which was perfect timing, that I just kind of, don't get engaged and just sit and listen and make that my participation. That kind of felt good, and because
mm,
there was that expectation to have to come on and talk and say stuff, and uh, where are you at now and all this, and you're like, I'm not anywhere. Nothing's changed. There's no update. There's no information. There's no shift. There's no awakening. There's no story to tell you. There's nothing happening, which is what I see all around me with everyone else, and I'm like, what's going on? But I'll just sit back now and just relax and be here.
mm. Can you imagine whether it's true or not? It's another story. I don't actually know, but I can't imagine that actually nothing has changed. I can imagine that any changes go back and forth or up and down or are very subtle, are not noticeable. I can easily see that changes can be not noticeable. We're pretty bad at recognizing change in ourselves. I mean, one of here's a classic one. What Donald Trump was asking everybody during his election campaign is, "Are you better off now than what you were 4 years ago?" Well, it's a crazy trick question because nobody is ever better off now than they were 4 years ago, unless, of course, 4 years ago they were in a really bad place. But essentially, they don't even remember what it was 4 years ago, and they're always going to say, "No, I'm worse off now than what I was then," because now are their shortcomings and their struggles. Back then,
Yeah.
they've forgotten about them, you know. And what we're what we're finding here is that the Conservative Party, we're about to have an election. The Conservative Party's pulling the same trick here. You know, you're worse off than what you were 4 years ago. Well, you're not, definitely not. You know, in most cases, but everybody thinks they are. So it's going to
Yeah,
get
it's a
them. Yeah.
psychological trick, isn't it, really?
Yes. Yeah. So our idea of how are we? You know, have we changed? You know, do we remember even yesterday? Do we remember those moments of things? You know, we tend not to. Um, yeah. But the big one that's a really big one. So of course you probably remember me talking about my shift on a couple of occasions, and that was a huge real. That was the shift for me happened with the realization that I could not continue to be a seeker and be awake at the same time. I had to give up being a seeker. And that's not so easy because, you know, I had identified as a seeker for most of my life. And a seeker is a good person. You know, so it's a good thing to identify with as a seeker. So to give up identifying as a seeker is not so easy.
And you say that was your real. I remember you telling the story before. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but now that you've said it, you had the realization that you had to give up seeking. That doesn't seem to be. It was a thought or an idea in your head. It was more meaningful or deeper or like a sort of was it even energetic? Like what changed? You're describing it now, so I think of it as you just had the idea, I must stop seeking. But was it more than that,
Oh
Vince?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a big one. Yeah. So the phrase that I was told by this bloke in America, by a man named Eric Gross, he said, "The mosquito bite of seeking will never heal while you keep scratching it." And that just blew my mind. I just went, "Oh, of course, of course." You know, it's like so. Before that, I had um, an unexposed expectation that I would just slide into being awake and never realized that there would be giving up. Never realized that I was stopping myself from being awake by continuing to be a seeker.
Yeah. And what I notice, and it's obvious to me as well, when I'm not seeking or when I do stop or try to stop, you're left with yourself and you're
That
left
was it.
with your
Yep.
feelings, your emotions, your uncomfortablenesses in the body. And
Everything.
so everything is there to face.
Yep. That was the follow up for me was well, okay, so what that leaves is just this. And so I had this phrase, this is it. And that's what I used for a long time. This is it. This, whatever this current experience is, that's it. There's no getting away from that, no matter what I want. In fact, wanting anything different to that is absolute insanity. And also I had the realization that by the time I became aware of what this is, my experience, it was already done. It was finished. So the idea of wanting it to be different is just sheer insanity. All that can do is corrupt the next moment.
Yeah.
So
And I
there
think
was
when
a,
you're,
you're going,
no, I was just going to say, and I think when you do face, I'm going to say it this way, when you face the present moment or this is it, stuff does start to bubble up and be looked at. And I can't remember one of the things I started to look at when I stopped seeking last week for a period of time. Something came up and I was feeling it, and right away it moved to a memory of being a young child in a supermarket or a store, and I'd lost my parents, and the fright of that was still in me.
yeah,
You know
isn't it
that
crazy?
was trapped
Yeah,
there. Just little stuff that you could say to somebody. Oh, yeah, I remember being a kid and I got lost. I was afraid. But when it comes up viscerally, you're like, oh, that's in here too now. That's come up, and what else will come up when you're just willing to feel the unusual sensations or feelings or uncomfortablenesses in the body.
yeah,
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 so there's been a little bit of that happening as well. So
yeah. Well, that's huge stuff. That's huge stuff. So when that memory of the child lost, that you can kind of wave that away as just a memory, right? But the reality is that you recognize that it's still in there, right? And so what you've got is this really crazy thing where you've got a child's fear in an adult body, and it just
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense and,
But
until
it
you
runs the show.
recognize, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, you could, in most cases, you could say simply seeing that is enough to change it. Right? You can't see that the little child who's lost mummy and is afraid, that has no credibility as an adult. It certainly does as a child. In fact, it could be the end of the world for a child. You know, it's a survival issue, isn't it? But for an
Yeah.
adult, it has no credibility whatsoever. So all it takes is for you to see it from the adult perspective, and it's gone. It just dissipates. It no longer has its hooks in you. It only had its hooks in you because it was never examined. You know, and so up it comes. You see it, and it's gone, or it appears to be gone, and then comes back when it gets triggered again. And if that's the case, then there is something a bit more fundamental there that needs to be looked at. Um, and so what we need to do is be a little bit more proactive about changing that. And so I made a meditation where we go back to the young child and bring the adult perspective back to the child and do some healing like that. But that's only if it's a toxic starting point. If it's something that's fundamentally and reoccurring and doesn't seem to shift when we notice it, that's when you do that. But otherwise, it'll go. But there'll be other things come up. It's amazing. We carry our whole childhood around in us, until we no longer need it, until we just let it go. And we don't let it
Oh
go hollis
yeah.
bolus, you know.
Yeah, you remind me. See, it's funny, I forget stuff and then it comes back to me. So again, this week I was listening to Angelo was talking to one of those guys about the fetters. And it was just a technique about bins, and my neighbors keep the bins out till Thursday. The bins are collected Tuesday, they keep them out till Thursday. So it was a little trick of, well, what do you want? I want the bins brought in on Tuesday evening, after the
Yeah.
collection is over. And so I put that to those recurring things you mentioned. So one of the recurring things that I had was, and kind of crudely put it was, I don't want to have to work anymore to earn money. This was the recurring thought or
Yep,
feeling or
yep,
emotion. I don't want to work and I still want to have money. So to be independently wealthy enough to live my life. I'm not talking about being rich or anything. This was the thing. I got clear on it. I don't want to work to have money. And that's been recurring in me. And it's an energetic thing. It's an emotional thing. And straight away, when I sat with the clarity of my statement, which was essentially, I don't want to have to work to have money, that's when it kind of stuff started to unravel. I remember it's in some way connected to my dad, who kind of retired quite young after a very stressful working life. That was in there somewhere. And then that's when it jumped to the child afraid in the supermarket. So just sitting with those recurring issues you have, or thoughts or beliefs, and getting clear about what the issue is for you and just sitting with that, then it started to unravel loads of other weird stuff.
yep, yep, absolutely. And it's not like in the old way of thinking, the unawakened way of thinking would be, uh, I've got this idea going around in my head that I don't want to work to earn money. So there's something wrong with that because I do have to work to earn money. So I've got to stop feeling that. I've got to stop thinking that. Well, that's wrong. That's not the thing to do because you can't control those things. They come or they're not come. So you could eventually end up suppressing it, but it's still floating around in there. It's still going around. So, in other words, it contaminates the rest of your working life. But when you go, well, isn't that's a bit amusing because at the moment that's not possible, right? And you just accept that there's that thought there, but you just don't engage with it in a serious way. You do engage with it in a light-hearted, um, frivolous way almost, just recognize that, well, circumstances control this, right? Until I win the lottery or until something else happens, I'm going to be continuing to work for money.
Yeah, for me, the way I see it right now, and I don't think it's complete, but it's like working or not working will happen when it's meant to happen. That's
Yep,
just going to happen the same way as I'll stand up from the seat and use the toilet when I meant to. But the idea or the thought, I don't have to work to be independently wealthy, is just the tip of the iceberg of an emotion or a feeling or an uncomfortableness or a contraction in the body. It's something that's create something that's not being looked at, that's creating that recurring, "Oh, I
yes,
wish I didn't have to work." It's not actually, it doesn't feel like it's actually anything to do with work. And when it resolves, or when I get to the root of it and it resolves, who's to say working won't even be easier and more pleasurable, because there won't be that weight around the idea of work versus the
yeah, yeah,
actuality. So, but it was just interesting sitting with those sort of, what are my recurring beliefs or themes, or accepted ideas I have that I just need to question, and it's a simple way of questioning them. So yeah, I've been doing a
yeah.
bit of that, and I will continue to do a bit of that too.
Right. But what you just said, what you just went through, that little process, that was pretty good. That you mentioned, but I don't know if you realised what you mentioned. That you said, I don't know that it's actually about work. It's what it actually is some fundamental belief has been triggered, and that it just expresses itself like that.
Yeah, yeah. Viscerally, it's a hurt,
Yeah.
as a way of describing it more kind of truthfully, uh, and that unexpressed hurt or something that's not looked at is manifesting as I don't want to have to work. I'm sick of work and I don't want to work. That's the cry for help in some stupid, immature way, but it's getting to the root of what actually is that? What's going on?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's and it's that sort of take one practice, do it for a bit, which I'll continue to do.
Yep.
Because you
So
said it earlier, like I mentioned to my wife about the whole, nothing's changed. It's like it's gone so ridiculous. Years ago, there was all sorts of little, shifts and ideas, and I was making progress. She's like, "You've totally changed. What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "I haven't changed at all."
yeah, yeah.
So does, yeah.
What if you had a job you loved?
I don't even know what that looks like, Paul. That statement just because I don't know what I love. So to even know what the job would be that I love, it's an idea. I mean, there's times when I'm working, I'm in the zone and it's going well and I'm happy. And it's only when I think about it in advance of going back to work tomorrow, or there's that sort of, I won't say dread anymore, but oh, work. So I don't know what a job I love even looks like. I can't even imagine it.
Mm. So you triggered for me a part of a story from way back. I don't know how old I was. I was probably an adolescent, I'd say, and I said to my mum, "A big mistake has been made. I should never have been born on this world." And this was triggered by something similar to what you're feeling. And and I said, "The world that I should have been born into, everybody loves everybody else, and this is a big one, and nobody has to do what they don't want to do. That on that world, there are enough people who want to do everything that needs to be done so that everybody works at what they want to do. So there are even people who want to carry shit cans. So we're going back a long way because I'm an old man now. But back then people did carry shit cans, and there were people who enjoyed it. They got paid well for it. So they didn't they put up with the smell and the being looked down on by other people and all the rest of it because they got paid well. So there's always somebody who wants to do every job that needs to be done, right? But underneath all of this was what it was about: fairness. It's not fair. Why have I got to go and do that job when I don't want to do it? As a kid, and it was probably something as simple as clean up my room, or I don't know, go and feed the chooks, or it could have been something really simple. But it was that huge thing of being made to do what I didn't want to do. And so maybe it's not about the job. Maybe it's about being made to do it, have to do it, no choice.
That's part of it, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you have to pay bills, you have to rear kids, you have to do all that. So you could see yourself as being, well, you're kind of trapped into this. You can't just head off and live in a
Yeah.
tent in a field for a year. You have to provide, so you have to work. That's part of the story. Yeah. Yeah. But it
Can
wasn't
you?
like that when I was younger. Like I loved all sorts of work. I did every type of job, sold newspapers, did everything. I had tons of jobs.
But you
But
all
there was
wanted to
always,
do that, yeah.
well, no, it was like, well, I'm working and I'm getting somewhere to being someone, to being successful. It's just, it was always stepping stone to. I always had a strong belief that I would do well, and I'd, all that sort of
Mm.
positive attitude and self-help books and all that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
one thing you just said was you were getting somewhere, you were being someone. And what are we talking about now is not being someone.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. Which ironically might work out. better in the long run. But
Yeah. How are you, Kathleen?
Hey everybody. I am so grateful to have found you, Vince, and everybody sharing is I always hear something that's helpful. So Dennis, I missed the very, very beginning, but this conversation, the part of your conversation about seeking, you know, I was hearing that in these circles, like stop seeking. And I thought, well, I see the nothingness that I am. I'm I don't think I'm seeking for that. But what I heard when you and Vince were talking is I'm seeking an escape from what I don't like about the present moment all the time. That's the flavor of my seeking. I don't like this. This should be different. And boy, I just felt there was a sentence that you said, Vince, and maybe it was your little mantra. This is it. This is it. I just felt this warmth, kind of in this heart center. Like, oh, it is that freaking simple. This is it. That's so simple and so profound.
Mm.
And so I have spent a lot of today. I am navigating a set of symptoms in my body that I'm investigating with conventional medicine to rule some things out. And so I have been in and out of identifying with thoughts of awfulizing some future that I have no idea. And right now, in this present moment, or the moments when I feel I'm trying to get away from even labeling them uncomfortable. We're told that when these sort of things happen, something's wrong and that's uncomfortable and that's unpleasant. But how do I know it's not just an energy that's a different type of movement or it has a different quality? And yet the mind jumps in and makes up these scary stories. And the minute that happens, then the symptoms escalate. Like it is so, so obvious. And it's been interesting, and it's sort of this. I've been playing with just saying, okay, that's what's happening. There's a body mind that has this resistance against these sensations, and these thoughts are there, and this is it. Like, and if I can be with this is it, there's no problem. There's no future to get to. There's no past that the body mind didn't have those symptoms. Like just right now, there's aliveness and there is breathing happening. So I see that it's like the blinders come back on. And then I did have I speak to Vince one-on-one occasionally, and that's really helpful. And I know it was you, Vince, talking about how something happens and I have this urgency that I have to do something. And I can feel it in my nervous system. It is like a fight or flight response. And so today I got a text from my mother, and she was at her boyfriend's place. And I was there yesterday, and her blood pressure is really, really, really low, like dangerous for her to stand up by herself. And so she said, oh, Jerry went to Walmart and my blood pressure is really low. Well, immediately I was like, okay, I got to jump in the car. I got to call Jerry. What the hell are you doing leaving her alone? And I could just feel it. And then, of course, all the physical symptoms follow right along. And I was just able to say, nobody's dying in this moment. Like, let them live their life. And I mean, within 10 minutes, and I did, and I also did send a text to the hospice nurse. And I said, he's bringing her to the cardiologist, and she's not supposed to need these other doctors because she's on hospice and they take care of everything. But he's doing what he thinks is the right thing, and he doesn't trust hospice. Fine. And so she wrote back in a text, yep, just let it be. Let it go. You're not doing anything wrong. You don't have to rush up there. He's going to go to Walmart. She's going to get up to go to the bathroom. She's going to pass out and fall on the floor and break a hip. It's
Yep.
okay.
What will be, will be. Yeah.
It's so okay until it's not. until the conditioned whatever the hell, body mind with all its and Dennis, I loved your your inquiry into what beliefs are there. I had been thinking about joining this call and asking about, what is the shadow? And I don't know, I kind of am assuming maybe, Vince, from talking to you, that maybe the way you see it is a set of beliefs that were grasped by us or inculcated somehow or made up by the child, that are unresolved and that are not true and that are impacting our ability to function in the world as an adult. And I keep thinking they're big monsters in the closet, that there's some big trauma. And I think I just have the intuitive sense that they're very little subtle beliefs that have a big impact.
Absolutely. Huge. Yeah.
That there's so there's a fear to go looking for them, but I kind of feel like I've done so much. Well, no, I've done therapy and reflection, and I mean, I really think I have a pretty good idea of, but the little sniggly ones, or something you said, Dennis, about like as they come up, I see them for what they are, and I can relate them to certain events. A sense of at 5 years old that I've got two parents that are psychologically not mature adults and aren't managing things well, let alone being able to take care of me. So this is all up to me. This whole thing is all up to me. Hence the urgency that I got to do something, because somebody's going to die actually if I don't do something, which was what happened when I was 5. My dad attempted suicide. Goodness me, I hope some of my family members don't. Maybe you can edit that out. I don't think any of my family members would find this, but there are some that don't know. So anyway, I'm going on and on. I'm finally starting to see this dance of life, this movie that I'm an actor in, as interesting and curious and pretty damn funny at times. And also just I made my mom I was over there and she kept asking her boyfriend for when she going to get her lunch. And it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he's watching football and they're sitting side by side. And I did not get upset. I did not get triggered. I just said, "What do you want, Mom? I'll go make it." And so I made her lunch. She came and sat at the table. And I looked in her eyes and it was just, it was like my heart opened and there was her heart and there was this felt energy of just pure love and a sense of home. And I'm like, boy, that part of the movie is really fucking good too. So I'm feeling these symptoms and I'm like, I don't want to distract myself. Should I go into the feeling? Like, oh, I also think you said it, Vince, kind of like when to chase it down and look at it, and when to just seeing it is enough. So I'm learning to just trust that. I've always really been operated like that. But I can sit there and watch Angelo's videos and think, oh man, you're bypassing. It's time to do some deep shadow work. And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe not. So I was like, shadow work or bake a casserole for my friend who just had surgery. Yeah, that sounds good. So I went to the grocery store and she's a vegan and I'm a meatitarian and it was fun. I just looked up some recipes and interestingly enough, the body calmed down. The symptoms felt better when I was in the kitchen baking a casserole.
Yeah.
Oh, and oh my gosh, does it feel so, so good. Like this is the best drug out there. So I'm grateful for
It's
this.
good. Yeah. Yeah. I want to focus for a moment on the this is it thing. You know, the recognition that it's already done and in the past, even though it might only be milliseconds in the past, by the time we become aware of it, that could be seen as being trapped in something as well. But that's not how I took it when my shift happened. It it was definitely the inevitable because it was already done. So there was no choice about making it different. But there was not a feeling trapped about the no choice. There was a relief that there was no point in coming up with alternatives.
Me too, Vince. That is liberation. That is like, oh, I can take this death grip off the steering wheel. Like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh. To me, it's complete liberation. It's freedom to say it is what it is. It's already done.
yep. So it's a definite lightheartedness about that realization. And you can imagine that most people spend most of their life looking for alternatives to this.
Right here.
How much how much energy, how much
Yeah.
attention, how much everything goes into the craziness of trying to change what actually is already done or wanting it
Banging
to
your
be
head against,
different. Yeah.
banging your head against a brick wall.
I had a I had an experience as a kid, like what I mentioned about the unfairness and having to do things that I didn't want to do. My father kept saying I was lazy. That's why I didn't want to do things. I never bought that. I never saw myself as lazy, but I certainly had low energy for lots of things. I'd much rather sit and read a book than go and do a job, kind of thing. But I felt different all my life. As a kid and so on, I felt different to the other kids. I had different ideas, different values, and so on. But at one point, I, that unfairness thing got to me to the point where I started to dream that, oh, look, when I get to be 18 and I can get my license and I've got some independence, right, then everything will be okay. And then I got to 18 and it didn't happen. So I then switched it and said, oh, it must happen when I'm 21 and I become an adult. When I get to be 21 years of age and I'm an adult, everything will be okay. And when I got to 21, I had, oh, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up now. I had this realization, it's a fucking fraud. There are no adults here. They're all just big kids in adult bodies. I was totally blown away by the realization that the whole world was a fraud. People were out there pretending to be adults when in fact they were still bloody kids. They were still behaving like kids. And of course, when I look back now as an old man on it, and that was right. Most people still behave like a spoiled kid. And that's not a judgment per se, but it's a recognition that the childhood traumas persist for the lifetime. And every child is traumatized. No matter what, it could be the mildest thing, but still have a huge effect on them. Or it could be absolutely extreme and, yeah, whatever.
That's what I've noticed lately, Vince, that the lid on trauma is thinking. We use thinking. Our thinking is the thing that keeps us from actually feeling into,
Yep.
looking at,
Yeah.
sensing into whatever that trauma is.
That would be I would say, for 99 or 95% of the population, or whatever figure you want to pluck. But there are some people that don't use thinking; they use activity. But so people who have got OCD, for example, they would always be up there straightening things up and doing things like that. Well, that's obviously a pathology. But there are other people, like my mum was an obsessive cleaner, so she would use activity rather than thought. But most people probably use thought, and in fact, it's not one or the other. It could be a mixture of them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all do them to a degree. I can see myself in all the things you've mentioned. Yeah.
I love the video you made, Vince, on the child. It's just beautiful. I just love the way the ideas and the words came through you. Really, really nice.
Yeah, the interesting thing was that video, well, I call it a meditation, but whatever it is, that came about when there was a I was going to say a recognition, but maybe it's a belief, more likely, that in fact this is fundamental to most of us. Most of us have that child in us that that's got unresolved issues, and so that was it's amazing how appropriate it is for lots and lots of people to do that one. Yeah. So there's a kind of this is hard to put into words, but there's a kind of a feeling that really don't know how to say it. A feeling of okayness about whatever turns up. But it's much more intricate than just that. It's not an overlay on what turns up, but it's rather inherent in what turns up, that it's not meaningless. And I don't want to say that either. I don't want to get into meaning. Meaning is a construct. But it's that whatever turns up is relevant. Put it that way. Good, bad, or otherwise. Pleasant, unpleasant, or whatever. It's relevant. If it's here, it's relevant. You can imagine, you can make up a story and say, it's God putting it in front of us. That's the reason why, or life putting in front of us. The reason that it's here is because it's here. And whatever it is that's here in our life is here for us. So that okayness, there's a kind of a sweetness in that even if it's unpleasant, it's still sweet. There's still that relevance to be discovered. And if it's not seen, well, it'll come back. So with the shadow work, so Kathleen, for that one, it's just a conceptual thing. So calling it shadow work, the reason that it's shadow work is, in my mind, is that it's something that hides in the shadows. That's all. It's just stuff that we haven't realized yet because it's never come out of the shadows. The moment it comes out of the shadows and it's in daylight and we can see it, it's usually enough to, well, it'll certainly change, but usually it's enough to get rid of it, or unless it's that really deep fundamental thing. So this is a repeat, but worth repeating perhaps, just that one of the things I discovered about myself recently was that I had a series of two main triggers, and what it was just an annoyance at somebody for something they did. It's irrelevant really what they did, but I felt annoyed about it. And then I discovered inside that there was a belief that the world should operate the way I think it should operate. And of course, the moment I saw that, what a crazy belief that was. That was just, again, that was just insanity. That why would the world operate the way I think it should operate? But there was a belief that that should be the case. And I thought I'd seen that, and it was out of the shadows now, and it was gone. Like I didn't have a location in time for that one then. But then about, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month later, I got triggered again. And this time, I saw myself as a little kid, and this is purely a fabrication, I don't know about the actuality of it, standing in front of the fridge, demanding of my mother that I get ice cream. Hands on hips, demanding ice cream. And I got it. Of course I got it. My mum gave me ice cream because I was about to throw a tantrum, wasn't I? Or I was in the act of throwing a tantrum saying, I demand ice cream. I want ice cream as well, what I was saying, just I want. And then I realised that I had a belief that my wanting had power, that my wanting got for me what I wanted, just because I wanted it intensely. That wanting had power. And the realisation there linked up with the idea that what I want is the world to be this way, not that way. I don't want idiots like Trump running the show. So there's that. So here I could see the idea that the world should be the way I want it to be was based on this idea that if I want it hard enough, I'll get it. And again, crazy stuff, isn't it? The moment you see something like that, you got to shake your head and go, where did that come from? What, total insanity that would happen. So of course you've got to let it go when you see that. Now I don't know whether or not there's any remnants of that left or whether that's been affected or not, but it hasn't come up again since. So I'll wait, and maybe it will, and maybe it won't. Who knows? But you can see that, that with that story, you can see how a fundamental belief that comes out of childhood can affect the way we see things for the rest of our life until we see
Yeah,
it.
especially when we don't know it's there.
Yes, well, more so if we don't know it's there. If we do see it, we see how crazy it is, and we can't maintain it. What also we tend to not recognise is resistance. When we want something to be different to what it is, there's a body contraction, and these things can happen at an unconscious level. We can be contracted and not even realise we are. And if we do suddenly realise how tight our body is and what we're hanging on, all of a sudden, it becomes obvious. We relax and, oh, huge difference, just letting go. But that that contraction can sneak up on us and we don't even realise it's there often.
Oh, definitely. And I think it builds up over time. Like I was saying to you about the sleeping this week, sleeping so much, and yet the body feels much more relaxed and like it's slowly letting go of tension bit
Yep.
by bit. But yeah, it just felt like I could sleep forever. It was great.
Yep. Amazing things
And
happen while we sleep.
yeah, well, actually, now that you mentioned that, I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned it before, and I'm not. I don't even know why I'm saying it. I suppose I'm looking for a meaning. Every, let's say, 6 months, I get these sort of weird. I'm going to call it a vision that I'll wake up, and I am awake, and instead of kind of something normal happening, I get this sort of. It's like a projector comes down between me and what I'm seeing. And in the past, it's always been like writing I can't understand and things moving through. And the last one there was this week. And again, this sort of projector comes down or a skin comes between something. And all these faces of these people started appearing, about 12 or 14 of them, of like, it's like they're tribal leaders or otherworldly people, just prehistoric or something, and all these faces are just coming up and they're all looking at me and I'm like, and you're awake and you're like, what are you trying to say? What are you talking to me about? What are you saying? Like, what's the story here? Why are you here? What's the meaning? With the writing, it was always, what the fuck does this stuff mean? I can't read this shit. It's like, and like every 6 months I get one of them. And it's not a dream and it's not a daydream. It's an actual something comes down and like a screen and this stuff all starts to appear. And that again happened this week with all these faces coming up. And I'm like, what does this mean? So I
Right.
don't know if anyone's ever had similar.
So I hear you say that the your usual response to that is to look for meaning in it. What if instead of doing that, you simply immerse yourself in the experience, and if meaning is there, it will present itself. So you can invite meaning, but don't focus on meaning. Focus on what is actually happening. What is the experience? See those faces clearer.
Yeah, when it happens, I'm not thinking or questioning. It's like I'm just watching the screen here and what's on it, and I'm just watching it. You're just like the telly, you're just watching it to see what comes up. It's afterwards then, I suppose, that comes in. What was that for? What did they
Oh, okay.
want? What
Yeah,
does it
yeah.
mean? What's going on? But at the moment, I'm just watching, like I'm watching a telly, and I'm like, it's a very unique experience. It's not like anything else.
Mm,
Um, Started happening years ago. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, uh, and you'd forget what they were. But this was because this one happened this week. It's like, oh, there's that thing again where this something kind of comes in and appears as a screen, and then all these things start to come onto it. And it's not like it's something I've watched on telly or a book. It's nothing that's in my mind. And so I'm looking at it going, well, what's this? Are they going to
mm,
reveal the lotto numbers to me? Maybe. I don't know. They don't seem to do that. It's always something else.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm inclined to say, who knows? Nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
And anybody that does know, maybe they do know, or maybe they'll make it up. Who knows? It's irrelevant what it actually is, in what it means, what's behind it, whatever. The actual experience that happens is the interesting one, and it is interesting. It's not a scary thing for you, eh? It's
No.
just rather interesting what goes on. Yeah. So. We could say, oh, well, maybe you're in touch with the spirits, or who know, who knows what kind of explanation, but any explanation is irrelevant. It's the experience itself and the openness of you to that experience is where you're going to get the value from. If you are able to just simply watch it with interest, with curiosity, something may or may not be revealed, or it may just be an interesting experience that's done and dusted when it finished until 6 months later when it comes back, or what? Who
Mm.
knows? Yeah, it's interesting. What I do recognise is that we have got no idea. I say we, the royal we. I'm meaning me. I have no idea of what's really going on, the extent of being human. I don't know where that ends or begins. I don't know. Are we all capable of being in touch with things that nobody or hardly ever experienced? I don't know. But I do know that we don't know, and we do know. I do have this belief that there are no finite boundaries to whatever. That's why I say
Yeah.
I don't know what this thing called enlightenment is. If it's more than waking up, maybe one day I'll discover it, maybe never. Who knows? Maybe it doesn't exist, maybe it does. I have no idea. And I can't for a moment believe that I'm at the end of any journey. I don't know about reincarnation. That's a classic one. Right, I have a convenient story that reincarnation is what we do every morning when we wake up, but I don't know about this other multiple lifetimes thing. Right? There's appears to be evidence for it, and who knows? I don't know. So God knows what's going to happen. Am I off on another journey when I die? Maybe. Maybe it's just non-existence. Who knows? I don't know. I'm curious though. Will I still be curious and when I'm in the act of dying? Maybe. I don't know.
I heard someone say recently, every time you die, you just jump multiverse and you continue on in a different universe. You never know. So you've probably died a billion times, but you're still jumping multiverses. So
Mm.
But it was significant, your point, Vince, that I want to kind of highlight is that there is immense freedom in fully accepting that you don't know. And by fully accepting that, you release the need to have an opinion, at least a strong one, which also loosens the sense of self, the sense of you having an opinion that might be different from somebody else.
Well, I do have opinions, and they're different from other people. Um, but I only say that that's just language. When I say I do have opinions, there are opinions here. They turn up, um, but there seem to
But
be
I'm
opinions usually.
I'm just pointing out that it's easy to be caught in an opinion if you're not
Yes.
aware of it, and that kind of energy around, especially arguing for your opinion,
Oh
is
yeah, yeah, for
the
sure.
energy of swimming in the self.
Yep. Yeah. And circumstances that arise, as I say, if they're there, they're relevant. And for example, that the Trump thing has been a really big one for me in recognizing my opinions about things. Yeah. And since that, I recognize a whole lot of stories that turn up about how it could turn out better. Good things can come out of. I heard somebody say the other day, good things come out of bad things. And I thought, when I heard that, I thought, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but engaging in those stories also projects the future, right? And then you're kind of out of what's happening now.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe not
that's
out
an.
of, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, Mary said something there. It's just an interesting thing that was coming up earlier when Kathleen was talking for me, and it is this. It's. I'm going to put it this way: this futuring we do is a big cause of suffering. Even relating it to work, or going back to work, and it's not as bad as it used to be. But when we future, when we think about the future, worry about the future, how do you get rid of the futuring that's negative and stressful and damaging and all those things versus planning for a future that may never happen, holding it lightly. Like, when you're awake, do you stop futuring altogether? What's your experience, Marius, at the moment with futuring and the stress related to what the future holds, and how is it a case, well, you can't just stop doing that? It's about, like we were talking earlier, revealing traumas, hurts, healing things to quieten down the mind so there's less of that, or what's the view?
Well, futuring can happen, but it's usually seen very quickly, and so the interest drops in the futuring. So, and also in my experience, um, thoughts are more in the background than it used to be. So it's more space between. It feels like more space between. Um, how should I say this? Um, there's just more space between me and well, me, I say me, but between the thought and a reaction, to say it in that way. So so two answers to that. Like I said, I don't get it that get hooked as easily because of the space, and I lose interest very quickly because it is seen as being futuring very quickly.
And that you've just described, that's as a result of a shift, an awakening, a Ken show. That's the new landscape post an awakening. Yeah.
That is what I experience since my shift in perspective.
Everybody's going to have their own version of that. Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the techniques I used to use a lot was when I recognized there was a story happening, I would intentionally append to the end of it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So here's an interesting one. Futuring is happening. Okay, we've got a story about the future. It's happening now. It is part of this when you're telling yourself a story about the future. So if instead of focusing on the content of the story, you focused on what triggered that story to come up, you're really, really very much in the now.
I also want to add to what I just said that that wasn't an immediate effect of changing perspective. Has been a gradual process in many ways, and like the loss of interest in thoughts, it was in my experience a gradual process as well. So I think that's important to mention, that it's not just like now I awaken and I have all the space and the lack of interest right away. So don't
Yeah.
go looking
Yeah.
for that.
Oh.
Have you been, Shafi? Haven't seen you for a while.
Hello. Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's been a while. I think it's been a couple of months, and hard to say what was exactly, because I was thinking also this morning when I was thinking about joining this session, and was thinking about like what happened actually during the past couple of months, and I think it was after joining a couple of months, I realized it became as a way of another form of seeking, another way of like looking for answer, wanting to get something out of this. And I was kind of curious to know what exactly am I looking for these sessions, and which has been the theme in a way for the past couple of months, that I'm just like looking to what I'm usually doing, either like in a grand scheme of things, in a job or relationship or whatever, or in the subtle ways, like. And so that's what like my schedule also was changed. I, was going away, so I stopped joining, and I I guess this morning when I wanted to join, first of all, like the schedule opened up and I had the time to join, and I wanted to see if there is anything else that I'm actually looking for, because as I was listening, I think I joined late to this meeting. I didn't realize the time change, time zone change. But the conversation you had, and you were talking about like, I know that I don't know, has been the current, actually my experience, that I don't really know about like anything that I want to put my finger on it and try to come up with an idea, either myself or even their idea of my own, or an idea of someone else that I perceive it through my own kind of thinking and imagining. And so I form an idea about like those concepts. And the more I just, I guess, in a way, I don't know how to phrase it, how to frame it in a like the sense of just being, or I am, or like isness or suchness, or just like senses. I think that's the only thing that I can just be, and in a way, just which I don't do anything about. It just like happens. It just always is.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, it's just like I find it very good pointer, at least for this stage of me. I don't know how it changed in the future, but for now, I just find it a good pointer. Just whenever I find myself in getting caught in mind, going back to that, and it just it just is very different. It's very different than just forming an idea. And I realize, like, through that, I also understand all the different like concept or the wordings or the different thing that people were talking about, and it's completely different than what I had in mind. Completely different than what I had in mind. The idea that I form about them. I guess it's a long way to just say that I don't know, but no complaints, nothing to seek or nothing to look for. It just
Yeah, good.
being there and being in a curious way.
Yeah. One thing that you triggered for me when you were talking was about knowing you know that you don't know. And I had a shift in that just yesterday, actually. Yesterday morning at the Feta group, I had a big shift in that one. And I realized that it was me that didn't know anything. And then what I did was kind of like I held up a mirror. This is just what comes to me now, and saw that the me was not there. When I looked in the mirror, there was no one there. So the idea that of not knowing becomes something independent of this person called Vince. There was not knowing of knowing, and not knowing of who didn't know, let alone what didn't know. I was carrying around a long time that I didn't know anything. And yesterday that shifted to include the I. That's also become an unknown.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's again, we're using language, and it's hard to just like use a use a use a word that by its nature has duality in it. So for example, when you say knowing, it means that so there is not knowing, or if there is not knowing, there is a knowing, because we just like put it aside. It's hard to say, but I guess still using the language is that how it changes, how the experience it changes. But I guess I heard it before, but my mind comes up with the concept, oh, it gets better and better, so there should be different levels, or there should be like, this is not it, and this should be like getting better in terms of like what my mind comes up with. But it's not, as you said, like things turning up, things are showing up, but in not a hierarchy way, like in not a way of this is better than before. It's just like unfolding in a way that's hard to describe, and knowing where does it go.
Yeah, I get that. And lately I've had this almost overwhelming, that's just words again, but the subtlety, there's just infinite levels, if you like. Just that's a concept, but just, you know, when we think we don't know, then suddenly we realize that there's more that we don't know, but it's not actually a thing that we don't know. It's the knowing itself, which is, it's just crazy. We get into a loop, feedback loop on ourselves with it really easily. Yeah. So the whole, so we've got to negate the word knowing in the end, because knowing, that word implies that there's something to know or something to not know, and there isn't.
Yeah, and it is the same with like all the wars and all the concept, I guess, like the suffering and not suffering, rest and restlessness. I think anything that we come up with as a goal or something to just like go for it, and just become something that like it's not that, so I'm looking for something else. Even just talking about that makes it bad, because it's not, but still it includes that also. So I guess now I understand like why some people like prefer to not even talk, or silence, or just like as a way, because it just like adds more complexity in a way to it, which is fine, but it could adds more noise, more unnecessary noise. I don't know, maybe it's necessary.
But what we're doing is we're using a thorn to remove a thorn. We're using the mind to negate the mind. We're using experience to negate experience. You know, everything has got a complete circle, and in the end, it vanishes up its own arsehole.
Yeah, it's such a foreign concept for the mind, and hard to just explain it or talk about it either with someone else or just like in your own mind. But it's fun at the same time also.
Good.
Just want to elaborate on that. Not knowing is, like you were pointing at, it's just silence. It's not neither knowing or not knowing. It's direct experience of what is. Thoughtless.
Yeah, until you make the silence a goal also, because people hear that silence and then they try to be silent, which like negates it.
Yeah, I found that a really interesting one to play with, because there's no such thing as silence for me. If I'm really quiet, I can hear my tinnitus, and there's no escaping from that. So there's no such thing as silence. There's always some sound. But there's not being aware of any sound. I guess you could call that silence, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? How are you going, Ray?
Oh boy. I've been pretty distracted, I think, just lately. In my yeah.
Just a lot going on. I think mm, some of you may have known from previous meetings that I'm kind of going through the separation slash divorce with my wife at this point, and so that's been kind of a challenge and a distraction for me, and kind of to make matters worse, I guess. I just told my mother about this, and my mother and I don't have, a very, very good relationship for a number of reasons, but I just figured it was important for her to know. And so I told her, and then, that's really kind of set her off in a way. So, like the last few days, he's been calling me every day, telling me like what I need to do to, both to get more information about the situation and also to tell me, in a way, like what I need to do next and like, what I've done wrong. And so that's kind of been its own thing. And then today, my my mother started texting my wife. And so now my wife is just like, I hate this. Make it stop. Like, call your mother and tell her to stop this. And I'm also, working, so it's kind of like, so there hasn't been so much in the way of the feeling of peace. So yeah, a lot of distraction lately.
So one thing
And
I'm
so
interested in is when your
Mhm.
mother, when you after your mother, when your mother responded to what you told her, did it make you
Mhm.
feel like a naughty little boy?
Not really. Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, so I don't really know how to characterize it, but she kept giving me this advice, and I was just like, I'm only telling you to like give you the information so that you know what's going on. Like I don't
Yeah, not asking for
it's
help. Yeah.
right, exactly. Like we've never been super close. Like she doesn't come to visit. Like she doesn't really know my wife very well. Um, and she just kind of has this irrational confidence that like any thought that enters her head is like the idea that will work and exactly what I need to be doing. And in a way, I admire this incredible confidence that she has, but I also find it very frustrating because it's like 1,000 things a minute, and then there will be some kind of contradiction in there, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this is not really what I need right now. But it's also interesting because I think in the past she might call or text me, and I would almost just be like, I'm not going to respond to this right now. But lately I've just been like, here it is. I'm gonna call her back and spend an hour on the telephone with her. Um, and I don't know. It's
So I'm interested
yeah.
in that feeling that response that arises were of, okay, I'll call her back. So is that a new thing for you? Is that are you talking about an acceptance of the situation with that?
Yeah, it is a new thing. I mean, I think my response to a lot of our interactions in the past is like, I mean, I don't know. I used to get pretty upset, and I still like today at least I found myself getting a little bit upset. Um, I don't really know. I think in a way I recognize that she's trying to help in her own way.
Mm?
Um, and in a way I also kind of almost see it as a little bit of a challenge to myself to be like, okay, well, this is not going to be an easy thing for me necessarily, but she's trying to help, and I'm just going to call her back and see what she has to say. And it almost always, devolves into something that is not super enjoyable for me.
Mm,
But you know, um, but yeah, it's kind of it's almost like I'm trying. It's an exercise in staying present and not
yeah,
reacting too much.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely a change. I usually and I think also like she's become more insistent in contacting me. Like every day, or every day for like the last 4 days now, she's been like, "We got to talk about this." And so it's also become a little bit harder to ignore, whereas in the past, she might not contact me for weeks. But
yeah,
now I
yeah,
think she sees that there's a problem or what she perceives to be a problem, and she wants to get to work fixing it and figuring out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
So you could say, that there is an intention that she has. We just imagine this, that there's an intention to help, you know,
Mhm.
and that kind of morphs into an intention to fix something, and that morphs into it should be how I think it should be for her. And
Yeah.
that,
I
and
mean,
none of
yeah.
those are not separate. There's still
Mhm.
the goodwill thing there, in spite of the fact
Mhm.
that there's this kind of attitude of how I think it should be.
Yeah, and I mean, there is an aspect also of almost like making this about herself in a way, where she's like, like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to, yeah, I know the right things to do. Like I'm going to fix this for you,
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, you
in a
can
way.
also see
Yeah.
that her identity is changing as a result of this, right? For a start, she's got a strong identity as a grandmother, no doubt,
Mm.
right, with your kids, right? And then she sees the pair of you as her kids, even though she wasn't. Um, there wasn't a lot of contact before, maybe about that, and she's not really intimate with your wife, but nevertheless, she would see. So her whole image of herself is going to change as a result of this, and that, of course, is a bit threatening, isn't it? Anybody's idea of themselves changing is a bit of a threat. So maybe she's
Um,
responding to that too.
so my perception of it, and I recognize that this may just be, my own sort of biases, is I think that like any kind of drama that comes up, um, she's just like really interested in it because
Yep, yep,
it's an opportunity to sort of parcel out blame and like find like who's right and who's wrong, and almost to just and in a sense like to tell people what to do. Like it
mm,
almost becomes like an exciting game for her, is my impression. And I kind of had to tell her at one point, it was, and again, this is like me trying not to be too reactive, but I was like, Mom, I don't think we have like the kind of relationship where like you sort of understand some of the dynamics that are going on here. Um, and I was just like, again, I'm telling you so that you're not like surprised, you're not blindsided. Like I don't think you necessarily like need to be telling me what to do. And I don't know. I think she's just like it seems weirdly exciting to her, where she's like, well,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm, you know, and it's all over the place. She's like, well, you need to talk like sweet to her, and you need to like her birthday's coming up, like you need to give her money, and then
Like as if it was going
when
to change anything. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just like, I don't this none of this sounds right to me. And then it'll be like, well, we're sleeping in separate bedrooms now, and I get the sense very much that my wife doesn't like want me around or in her space. And she's like, well, you don't have to do everything she says. Like you can like she's not bigger than you. And I'm just like
Yeah.
like that, I
Whoa.
can't like yeah, like none of this sounds right to me, and it sounds like kind of contradictory. And yeah, I don't know. I've had times in the past, not many, where I've like reached out to my mother in times of like emotional turmoil, and pretty much every time I realize quickly like, oh, this is kind of a mistake. Like this is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
this is
yeah,
not going
yeah.
to work out. is not going to work out in a positive way for me. And so, so yeah, today in particular has been a little bit challenging because I think that, it's starting to, like, my wife is starting to be affected by it. And her stance is kind of just like, I don't like the way this is going. I don't like what's happening. I need you to change it, which is sort of like, has been a dynamic throughout our marriage that I find really frustrating. And she's just like, I hate this thing, like, in our house, like, I need you to fix it. And just like in various ways of our in our
Yeah,
lives.
yeah.
And it puts like a bit of pressure on me, and especially when I'm like kind of investigating the idea of control in general, and sort of like, what am I really able to control here? Like, it almost puts the onus of control on me to like make reality the way that she wants it to be.
Mm,
And
mm,
I'm just like, man, like it's a lot of the things that, I've been thinking about and trying to investigate through, this group and just like various non-dual investigations, but it feels wrong.
mm,
And
mm.
especially when it's like not even my own thoughts that I'm following necessarily, but like somebody else's image of how the world should be that I
Yeah,
like my thoughts may not even agree with. And so it's just like a lot of
yeah, lots of stuff happening. Yeah. So the idea
yeah.
of boundaries occurs to me here, and
Uh-huh.
and I'm not saying this is the right way to go or anything like that. I'm just saying, have you considered telling your wife if she's texting you and you don't like it, it's up to you to tell her to stop, not me.
Yes. I
That would
actually
be
said, yeah.
establishing a boundary, wouldn't it?
I said that very thing, in fact. And it was, I don't know. So my wife and I are not extremely communicative at this point. Um, Man, just what a, like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, what a strange situation. So I'll try to be very brief about it, but basically my wife texted me that says like, your mother is calling me. Can you call her back? I'm out with the boys right now. So I was like, fine. So I called my mom, and my mom is like, I'm at your house. I've dropped something off in front of your house. And like, I'm worried that it's going to get stolen. So, you know, I, I don't know. And I was like, it's not going to get stolen. Just leave it there. We'll be fine. And so then she was like, no, give me your wife's mother's house because or your wife's mother's number because she lives nearby. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, I didn't feel great about it, but I was like, okay, fine. And then, oh man, I don't know. I think I like texted my wife back, and I was like, this is how my call went. And she was like, no, call your mother now and tell her like not to do that. And I was like, my reaction was just like frustration, where I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah. You're the meet in
angry
the
about this
middle here. Yeah,
right, exactly. And so my response was like, I don't want to be the go-between you and my mother. If you want to tell my mother something, like, call her and tell her yourself. and and her reply was like, you should not have given your mother my mother's number. And I was just like, I am sorry. I thought that her intentions were benign enough. Like, it's putting me in a bit of a weird spot to be like, I will not
yeah,
give
yeah.
you my mother-in-law's number. At least that was my feeling at the time. Anyway, I did end up calling my mother and just being like, do not call Audra's mother and just leave the stuff in front of the house. And my mom was like, fine. I don't know. But it's like, I'm trying to behave like a reasonable person and just like do the right thing without like prejudging anybody too much, right? Like, the thought definitely crossed my mind when my mother asked for my mother-in-law's number, being like, oh, this is not like,
Yeah.
maybe she's going to do something crazy. But like, I don't know that for a fact. And it puts me in a weird spot to be like, I'm not going to give you my mother-in-law's number because I'm worried you're going to do something crazy. It's a reasonable enough request. These two people know each other. So I'm just like, here's the number. And I don't
So
know.
are you
This
feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of this? I get that feeling myself when you're telling me about it.
I think I was at the time. Um, and now recounting it, I feel it again. At this point, I think the situation has resolved to the extent that it's not going to be an issue for me now. Um, at
So
least
does that
hopefully
mean
not
that
anymore today.
you've settled into some place that's better? How when you say it's not going to be an issue for you now, what do you mean? What's changed for you?
Well, I think my mother's left whatever she needs to leave by her door, and she's going to go back to her home. Um, and so I don't know. That's fine. The
Right. Okay.
current
So what I asked
What
is
if,
what's
yeah,
changed for you, and you're
oh,
telling
what's
me
changed
about
for me?
out there. Yeah.
Oh,
if that exact thing happened again, how would you?
yeah. How would I respond? That's a great question. I think I would still be pretty annoyed. So I guess the most honest answer to that question right now is like I would probably I would probably respond similarly. Which doesn't feel good for me to say that, you know? Yeah.
I I just want to share something that came up here when listening to your story, and this is
Mm,
just my story, my interpretation, so recognize that.
mm,
Um, but Vince was touching on boundaries, and I that's what came up here as well. And but the boundaries wasn't necessarily only for your wife, but towards your mother as well, and maybe more so.
mhm.
And that's a harder boundary to set, I imagine.
Yeah. Okay. And I appreciate that. And I agree with you. The where things have gotten at this point is like, I've told my mother, like, please don't call or text my wife, you know? Like, I don't think that that's going to be helpful. And she's like, oh, I'm gonna do it anyway. Or whatever. At times she relents and says, okay, I'm not gonna do it. But then at times she's like, well, I think I'm gonna do this anyway. And I feel like I've reached a point where I don't know. Like I've said sort of like, I do not want you to do this. I don't really feel like I have too many levers of control otherwise to just be like, you
Hmm.
absolutely can't. You know what I mean? And
So
so,
one thing that occurs to me is that you could at this stage say to your wife, I've told her not to do it. She said she's going to do it anyway. You block her on your phone.
yeah, I suppose that's fair. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've told my wife, I asked her not to do this. And, I think she understands um, that my mom isn't going to do what I ask her to do a lot
Oh
of the
yeah,
time.
mums know best, don't they?
Yeah, that's the message. That's the slogan, it seems like, in my case. Um, so so yeah, I don't it's a yeah, there's a lot that I'm figuring out already, just with like my wife and I. Um, and adding the mother element into it has been I guess kind of a complicating factor in a lot of ways.
Hmm. So
Not the main issue. Mhm.
if you were to isolate stories about what might happen in the future and even the past, and ask yourself frequently what's happening right now. in this moment here, would that alleviate a lot of the stress and confusion and potential
Yeah.
anything?
I mean, I think that that is my primary strategy, is to basically try and stay in the present as much as I can. Because since things have really sort of accelerated in terms of the dissolution of our marriage, I've gone through phases where I'm kind of looking into the past and trying to be like, where did things go wrong? Like, what is it? Like, what's the story of what happened? And that is a bottomless pit of despair, and like not super helpful. And then, I've also had times when I'm looking ahead into the future, like I have to find an apartment. How am I going to get my furniture into this apartment that I don't have? Like, how am I going to talk to my children? And that is also a bottomless pit of despair. So I think that what I try to do is stay in the present as to the extent that I can, and then
Okay,
deal with the issues as they come up.
So let's talk about that for the moment. There's obviously some skill that can be developed in staying in the present or being in the present. The first thing that comes to mind is when you discover that you're not in the present, do you have an opinion about that? Do you judge it? Or does it just simply trigger you back into the present? So again, there's no answer. It's a case of just watch what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find that you're going, oh, I'm in the future, I shouldn't be, that's what happens. But we would rather you go, oh, I'm in the future. Okay, what's happening now? It's just a flip rather than a judgment and then an attempt to stop it. But you don't stop it. You don't know where these things come from. You can't control what thoughts turn up. So if a story of the future or the past turns up, that is just what it is, isn't it? And it's happening in the present. But the recognition that you're lost in a story like that will bring you back to the present. You don't have to judge it.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm at, whereas when I recognize what's happening and, recognize that I'm winding myself up thinking about the future, I think basically that recognition brings me to a place where I'm able to, like, I don't want to say that I never judge it because I'm sure that
if
may
it
be
happens,
there.
it happens. Yeah.
Right. But in general, my thought is I'm pretty good about just recognizing it and
Excellent.
sort of letting it go. Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Yeah.
Ray, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Just to me, this seems like a huge deal. What you're going through, it's in one way it's heartbreaking, and I'm just wondering how are you being supported through all this?
Well, I've told you about my mother. She was doing her best to offer support in her own way. I've like I don't have a great support system in place. Like what I'm trying to do now is being more open with some of the friends that I do have and just kind of telling them what's going on in my life. But
you realize,
I
of
think,
course, that when you tell them things like that they're all probably going to want to fix things as well.
yeah, no, for sure. And, they try to offer whatever help they can, which I appreciate.
So can you be clear with them that what you really want in the way of support is just for them to listen, just for them to be accepting, not you don't want them to try and fix it.
Yeah, I don't think I've been super clear with them about that because I feel like if they do have advice, like I'm generally open to it. Um, I don't know. Like I don't have a lot of close friends that I can talk about stuff like this with. I'm trying to be a little bit more open about it because I recognize now that I put a lot of the burden of emotional support on my wife, and now that's no longer available. And so I'm going to need to find some other, you know, some other places to look, I guess, for emotional comfort until I can, you know, manage some of this stuff better on my own, at least. Um,
It feels like you're
but
trying to really keep it all together, Ray. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I'd be losing the will. Like I'd be going off my head. I'd be enraged. You're very together. I don't know if this present moment thing is trying to keep a lid on it, but the sense I got when your mom stepped into and she's trying to help, I imagine that part of you where it was, in some way happy about that someone's on your side fighting for you.
yeah, I don't know. No, I would say in general, I'm not super happy about my mother's involvement at all. Like I don't know. We don't have the kind of relationship where um, we see eye to eye on too many things. And I think I've gotten to the point with my wife where it's mostly just I recognize that. I mean, essentially, it's just like she doesn't want to be married to me anymore, and there's not like I kind of don't blame her for that, like not in a way of not in a self-castigating way, but just that's just kind of what she wants. That's what she and it's not really her fault. It's not necessarily even really her choice. And so
Mm.
I kind of feel like the infusion of like will that my mother's bringing into it, like tell her this, do that, like you know it just feels like conflict that's not necessary. um
Yep.
so so yeah, I think hmm, just in recent times, I'm not sure. Well, in recent times I've kind of got the impression that me being in the same house as my wife has been she's kind of expressed to me in certain ways, like through her behavior, that it's growing more uncomfortable for her to have me in the space. And so now I'm at the point where I'm looking at like maybe I need to move out of the house sooner rather than later. Um, for the sake of everybody involved. Um,
So why are you moving out and not her moving out?
um,
I don't really need an answer for that. I'm just
yeah,
saying you presume that it's your job to move out.
yeah. I mean, I do. It's I don't really have a great explanation for it other than that's kind of what feels right at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so,
So can you kind of? It seems to me like you're in a pretty good place, except that I also I feel you're hurt. I feel a hurt that something. Yeah. So, but in spite of being in a good place, I'm wondering if I'm just lost in that. Sorry.
I feel drawn to ask you if you would like to express how you feel about this, not in understanding or in concepts, but like obviously you have to use concepts, but like the experience of the feelings that you're experiencing right now.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I think that, you know, it's sort of been my stance, and it still is true that like I don't want to get divorced. That's not what I want. And part of the reason for that is I don't think that we've really given a repair much of a chance. Like we haven't really considered it or taken any steps towards it, in my opinion. No, I've shared this with her, and she kind of feels like, well, I feel like we've tried some things, and the bottom line is she doesn't want this to be um like she just doesn't want to be married anymore. And if that's the case, then me trying to fight this in any kind of way um is pretty fruitless.
Hmm.
And so in a sense it does feel kind of like surrender.
Yep.
And there's
So if you say
yeah.
if that's the case,
Hmm.
but it would seem to me really clear that it is the case.
Hmm.
So why are you saying if that's the case? There's part of you that wants it to be different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that part is there. Um, and you know, I've been like until we get a little bit further down the road with like lawyers and paperwork and everything, I think that, you know, I'm gonna have the impression that like there's still a potential for
Yeah. Okay, but so
like I'm not expecting it. I recognize that that's very unlikely and
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
mhm,
But Ray, what Marius asked you was to tell us
mhm,
what you're feeling, and you're talking about stuff.
mhm.
So what I'm asking you now is it difficult for you to get in contact with what you're feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would, yeah, I would say so.
Does it feel like if you start to get in touch with what you're feeling, that it will be a volcano that will erupt?
I kind of don't think so. I don't think it's a volcano that's going to erupt. Um, but I don't know. Like I just I can't really get to it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So it would seem to me that one of the things that you'll be feeling about this that you may not be giving much emphasis to is a feeling of helplessness. It's almost like this is something that's happening around you and to you, but
Hmm.
it's not really coming out of you. It's got nothing to do with you. It's like you're helplessly in a situation. Does that feel like it's true?
Yeah, to yeah. I mean, it's not what I would choose, I guess is what I would say. But it is
Yeah, yeah, but
clearly the
you're
situation I'm in.
intellectualizing again. You're intellectualizing.
Okay.
You're getting up.
Okay.
It's not what I would choose, right?
Mm.
What does it feel like to feel helpless? This is just one of many possibilities, but you know, what does it feel like? Where in your body do you feel helpless? When I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind with helplessness is shoulder slump. Hmm,
Mm.
do that. Let your shoulders drop. and feel, is that part of helplessness for you? You're totally out of control. You've got no control about this situation. You're totally helpless. It's evolving the way it evolves. It's happening around you, and you've got no control whatsoever. As much as you might want it to be different, it is what it is, what it is. How does that feel?
It's just, yeah, I feel it a bit in the shoulders, and kind of like my head just feels really heavy. Like it feels like, almost the cartoon image of
Yep,
slumped shoulders, head down, kicking a rock in frustration,
yep. In frustration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, almost, yeah. Just like, yeah,
So we
just dejected.
discover in that helplessness, the frustration part of that helplessness is still a part of you that says, I want it to be different. Is it? What would you say frustration is about?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think wanting it to be different, and just,
Yeah, being thwarted, isn't it? Really?
yeah, yeah.
Do you do you have like before all of this, do you have let's say a connection with your emotions normally? Or would you say that you're not so much in touch with your emotions?
I would say that I'm not really in very good touch with my emotions.
Yeah. One of the reasons I think why boundaries came up for me is that I imagined that you were in overwhelm. Like there was so much stuff happening around you that you had to deal with that wasn't even yours because there was other people's stuff. And so you're not giving yourself the room to feel into your experience of this whole thing. That is just my story, but it kind of makes sense. And I think it would be productive to get in touch with how you feel about all of this, if it's possible.
Yeah. I think that the desire is there. I would like to, there's some part of me that like just wants any kind of like emotional release. Like I'd welcome tears, or I would welcome anything like that. And it's just, I've kind of, looked for it, and I don't find it there. Or I just don't really find it. And the
I'm
story that I've
I'm
come up with. Mhm.
I'm imagining here, Ray. I'm going to jump in here for a couple of reasons, but yeah, I'm imagining that you're a little bit insulated from your feelings about this, and so that's why
Mhm.
that this particular thing. But listen, I've got to go. I suddenly looked at the clock and realised that I've got an appointment an hour away from here, and I've got an hour and 2 minutes to get there. So, Marius,
Okay.
could I make you host, and then you guys can just continue? Sorry about this. I've got a medical appointment I've got to get to. Um, so I'll just make
Yeah.
Marius host, and when you finish, just whatever. I'll leave my computer going, so everything should continue okay. Sorry, folks. Yeah.
All right.
And
All
Ray,
right.
man, my heart is really with you, man. Look, anytime you just whatever. Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate you. Thank you, Vince.
I used to facilitate men's groups, and I have seen a lot of men not being in touch with their emotions, but learning gradually to do so by trying to express, trying to, or through expression of what they're going through, tapping into their feelings slowly, gradually, and it kind of builds up to a fuller contact eventually. But it just to kind of start by giving your attention to your bodily experience in those situations, I think is kind of where you need to start. And I think if if you are not used to being in touch with your emotions, um, it's a gift to come in touch with them. So it's really something I encourage you to do.
Mhm. I mean, I think the intention is there. At least I don't feel like I'm afraid of my emotions necessarily. I find them elusive. Um, so I
But
guess it may be a question of like figuring out how to do that.
but
Um,
have you had space? Like, have you had somebody that is listening to you without giving you advice or trying to serve you some opinion or a story of what you might be feeling?
I've spoken with people about like what's going on, and talking with my sister in particular. She's been pretty clear from the start. Like, I don't have any advice to give you, but all I can do is listen. And so I've talked to her quite a bit, and I feel like I'm able to have a conversation about sort of what's going on without feeling, yeah, just without feeling a ton of emotion, like viscerally. And I guess, well, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask you if you've had any men in your life that expressed emotion or that could listen to you.
Not many. I mean, I spoke to one of my male friends about what's going on last night, and that was, one of the first one of my friends that I've told about what's happening. And I don't know. I think there was a little bit of, he offered me a place to stay, and he validated my feelings, and I'm sure gave me light advice, but I felt like all of it was, appropriate. He was supportive in a way that I did appreciate. Um,
I
yeah.
think I think what I'm trying to point to here is just that when we're not um, if we haven't had any role models who has shown us that it's okay to show emotions, to be emotional, and we kind of never learn how to do that. And so that's why I'm asking if you've ever had anyone in your life, any men in your life that has been emotional, has shown you that it's okay to be emotional and show emotions, and if you have any friends like that around that
Yeah.
is in touch with their emotions.
I guess the short answer would be no. And I
Yeah.
think, growing up, like my father was, an alcoholic, and he had, I think, there was some violence in the household. So if anything, I've maybe had the opposite, where growing up, like certain emotions were sort of dangerous and disruptive. Um, and I think in my present day life, like I have some ends, but I don't know, expressions of emotion are rare.
Yeah. You have any men's circles in your area?
I actually looked not too long ago, and no, the answer is I haven't been able to find any. And so the closest that I'd be able to find are like 12-step programs, which I don't know. I sort of have I'm not totally 100% on board with that yet, but I'm open to it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be. I just suspect that that would be um, maybe a game changer for you. Just in life in general, it's so much richness in emotions, so you're missing out. And just for
Yeah.
your particular situation right now, I think it would be healthy.
Okay. Hmm. All right. Well, I may seek that out. I think part of my hesitation is like 12 step and like alcoholism and sort of like addiction programs. I would feel, I don't know, I would almost feel like I don't belong there, or I'd feel a bit like an imposter going just with like my own sort of non-addiction related issue. But yeah, but there's definitely a part of me that just like wants to be in a situation where people are talking about things that matter to them and expressing emotion around that, just having a genuine conversation or expression of those things. So yeah.
Well, any addiction like alcohol or drugs or whatever, it's just a distraction. It seems to me that a distraction away from emotions is what you're addicted to. So I think
Yeah.
you will actually, with that perspective, maybe you won't feel so out of place.
Mm.
It's just different types of distraction.
Yeah.
Ray,
Well,
just to add from a just from a practical point of view, because I know this can be all spiritualized in some way, which isn't helpful. It's just your story is very provoking. Like, I mean, I'm certainly frustrated and upset on your behalf. What I wanted to say was, don't make any big decisions without first getting good advice, whether that's legal advice, because that can backfire. And you mentioned something earlier about kind of, is it really over? Can we work on it? And maybe you decide to go and get some relationship counseling, some help to show that you actually do want this to work. And maybe you do that on your own first, and see if that either helps you come to terms with this or helps in some way salvage it. I don't know, but to take action instead of everything happening around you. That if um, yeah, I just wanted to say that to you.
oh no, I appreciate that. Yeah, we've done some relationship counseling, and I've done some individual counseling as well. Um, so I've tried to be somewhat active about managing the situation. Um, and it's kind of peaks and valleys where at times I feel like there's things I need to do, and other times where I'm maybe more passive about it. So it's good to keep in mind. I appreciate it.
I'm a divorce lawyer.
Oh yeah. Um, well, we're trying to go in the uncontested route, basically. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's there's nuances to it that um, I don't know. I'm located in Texas. I imagine that you're not here, but it's
I'm in Louisiana, but the law is basically the same.
Oh, that's good to know. Well,
Uncontested
um,
is better.
yeah. Yeah. So my one, hmm, and you know, the feeling that's coming up for me now is I sort of feel um a little bad filling the space with this with my story and kind of what's going on. But I guess just
I
the
know
one thing
enough.
yeah. Well, the one thing that I guess I'll mention to you is like one thing that I've had a bit of a hard time with is when we talk about division of assets. Yeah, I so you know she's a surgeon. She's been in training a lot longer than I have, and is now you know making a good amount more money than I am going to. Um, and I don't know. So she'll say things like, "Well, I just want the division of assets to be fair. I just really want this to be fair." And it's going to involve, you know, fairly um, large transfer of my money to her. And I value our relationship in terms of like having a respectful co-parenting relationship. Like that's more important to me than the money. But yeah, I don't know. She said something to me where it's like, I can tell that the division of assets is something that is upsetting you. And what I told her is basically that, like, the idea that any of this is going to be fair is kind of what's like, it doesn't feel like it's going to be fair. Like, you know, like I don't want the divorce. And for me to be paying money, you know, for this thing that I don't want, um, is kind of painful. And I'm not trying to, you know, convince her to do anything one way or another, but I was just trying to express to her that when she sees any resistance or upset on my part, I mean, that's kind of why. So that's the one piece that I sort of still occasionally get stuck on. I mean, yeah.
All right, I gotta go, but I'll give you one piece of advice.
Okay.
Find yourself a small efficiency apartment as near as you can to your kids. Get out, leave your shit behind except for your toothbrush and whatever you got to have. Go
Mm,
to Walmart, get a bean bag, get a bed. You might not, one day you'll get something big enough for you and the kids, but in the time being, move out, get it out of your head, get away from her, and don't do
mm,
anything. You don't have to talk to a lawyer. You don't have to amicably divide up anything. Put it all on her. She's the prime mover. Let her move it.
mm. All
Okay?
right.
See y'all
Yeah,
later.
I appreciate that.
See
Thank
you,
you.
Paul.
See y'all.
Just for the record, I don't agree with what Paul said at the end, and he'll see the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna try to find a two bedroom just so I'd have a place for the boys also. But I don't know. It's
That's why it's
it's
always
good to
good,
get
Ray, to get good advice, whether it's good advice from people in the know or good legal advice. I don't know what it's like where you live, but you know, when you have a good solicitor or a good lawyer who isn't emotionally involved and will work for the good of the family in this process so that it is actually fair and not just fair for one person, because your state of mind is one that's not, you're not in good shape to be dealing with this. So it's always good to have experts around you to help you. That'll never do you any harm. It can only do you good. And quick, rash
Mhm.
decisions of you leaving the family home, maybe in 6 months when you're in a different process, won't look good. I don't know. So just be slow to do anything significant without good advice, whether it's a good friend or a good legal person. That's my view.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that.
What did you feel in that moment that you took breath? I'm just curious.
Um, oof. I don't, I'm not totally sure. I mean, I think I appreciated what Dennis was saying. It was just a feeling of support, like somebody's trying to help. And I think there's a little bit of I don't know, almost like an amusement that I don't really like. I feel a little uncomfortable being a center of attention in any way. Um, and that, I've taken up a lot of this. I feel like I've taken up a lot of the space in this meeting that's supposed to be about non-duality with very practical, um, sort of conventional thing that's happening in my life. And I don't know. There's maybe just like a little bit of, I don't know if I would describe it as like amusement, guilt, mild discomfort with that. But and then I did a big sigh.
Well, we're saying it. Well, I'm saying it for your great 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 grandchildren.
Hmm?
And I'm saying what I'm saying for your great 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 grandchildren. You see,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're going to have to come out of this and still be a dad, and be a dad that
Mhm.
can hold his head up high and feel comfortable in your own skin about how you handle yourself, because that'll have a huge effect on your children. So it's way more than just you in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the when I really get down to the root of what I'm worried about, the worry about is the worry that I have is that I'm, not good enough to rise to the occasion, I guess. That's something that I've sort of had to struggle with a little bit throughout this is the feeling that I'm fundamentally like broken or insufficient in some way. Um, and yeah, that's I feel like the pressure of like wanting to provide the stability and stability to my boys, my kids. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
I I have some follow-up questions to that, but I also want to give you the opportunity to not be in the spotlight if you prefer,
Um,
because you've been getting a lot of attention, but I'm fully supportive of that attention that you've been getting as well. I just want you to know that.
yeah, I think I think I'm okay with the follow-up questions. I do think being able to be vulnerable and express myself and feel a little bit more comfortable being a center of attention is something that may ultimately be healthy for me. So it may not be comfortable, but I'm willing to hang in there with apologies to anybody who might secretly feel annoyed by it.
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask you, you said you feel uh, those things that you were just mentioning, and
Mhm.
I wanted to know how does that how is the experience of feeling that feel. I'm asking this because I suspect you're expressing thoughts as feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. Um, a lot of these anxieties and kind of things that cause me the suffering are thinking about, our thoughts about the future, essentially. Um, worrying that I'm not going to have the capacity to be happy or functional. If we're talking about like body sensations and sort of, you know, feelings in that way, a lot of times it's sort of like I feel just kind of like a contraction in the, if I had to put it anywhere, I'd say it's in the gut. Um, but occasionally it'll just kind of be like it'll almost be like a shivering that happens like all up and down my torso and abdomen. Um, that's kind of the felt sensation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. Usually, when I feel fear, which is, or I could also say out of control, which way like triggers fear. I feel it in the gut. Would you say that fear, would that fit? I'm not trying to put a feeling on you. I'm just want you to try it out.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely characterize the thoughts that I have as fear, you know. Um, and so yeah, I think fear sounds right when I have that experience.
So
Yeah.
do you fear the unknown, or do you fear being alone, or do you have any idea what that fear is rooted in?
I mean, the fear is that I'm just kind of fundamentally flawed in a way that makes me unlovable and incapable of being happy. I, you know, probably the best way for me to put it. And like incapable of uh, supporting the people that I love, um, or being worthy of love.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is. It's a really big one. Um, mm. And
If
so I
you,
think.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, please go ahead. Please finish that thought.
I was just saying, like in the beginning, there was a lot more of that. Like that was kind of driving my. I mean, I'll call it depression. Um, but then, lately, since I've been trying to stay a little bit more in the present and recognizing when I'm sort of projecting into the future, um, I don't know. Those thoughts and fears feel a little bit less salient, which is, I think it makes me more functional, which
Hmm.
is I appreciate. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
Um, I was just going to ask you if when you're in touch with that sensation or that feeling of unworthiness or fear or whatever in the gut,
Mhm.
um, is it, do you think it's possible for you to drop your interest in the story that you're playing in that moment and just go to the gut?
Yeah, and just feel the sensations. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, when I feel that kind of sensation or sort of the shiver, sort of contraction, um, I do find myself just trying to focus on the sensation, to the extent that I can or that I remember to.
Have you noticed any movement, or what happens when you focus your intention there?
I don't know that I notice any movement really. It just uh yeah, I can't really say. Um I think that I'm thinking about this now, and I'm like, well, I think that if anything, it would take me out of my out of out of projecting into the future or into the past, and maybe keeps me in the present a little bit more. But um, I can't say that I've noticed it consistently does that. That's just sort of my conjecture right now.
Yeah, but it takes you to your direct experience of what is actually happening and not
Mhm.
into some projection that is not real.
Yeah,
So it's grounding you in here now. And that's, I think, in my experience, like the goal isn't to make it change or move. I was just wondering, not that that is like a goal in itself, because that's a subtle rejection of the actual what is, of the
Mhm.
actual sensation. Um, but yeah, if you can stay there without wanting it to be gone, I think that's the most fruitful place to be.
Yeah,
Engaging in projections is never the not so helpful.
yeah, yeah. And I think that I'm able to kind of sit there and feel the sensations. Um, I mean, until I invariably have to get up and go do something, like go take care of the kids or go to work or whatever. But yeah, I think I can do that.
Yeah, I think that's, if you can kind of make sort of a practice of that whenever you have time and space, that's a good practice for you, I think.
Mm.
And maybe uh, I'm not telling you to push it, but I'm telling you to set more time than you think than you're doing right now. You probably have more time if you really want to dedicate and give yourself some love. You
Mm.
could probably find some extra time than what you're doing now, and I would dedicate that time to actually just sitting with your direct experience, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I think the closest that I get to that lately has been taking my dog on really long walks because um, just sitting there, kind of feeling the sensations. Occasionally, I feel, there's this constant feeling like I need to be doing something or doing something else. Um, and so. when I walk my dog, it's almost like a happy medium because I get to do what I think is a good thing for my dog. And I don't know. Hopefully that's somewhat sufficient, but I'll still try to open up the time to just sit. I just find that I sometimes get distracted. And that's what I try to do.
Feel like also just telling you that I appreciate your vulnerability in this meeting, Ray. It was very nice.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate everybody's support and you're kind of bearing with me. Uh, yeah, yeah.
Same here, Ray. I appreciate so authentic, very courageous for you to be this vulnerable. And really it was just an honor to watch you have this conversation with Marius and access some of those feelings. And you got it. You got it.
Thank you.
I'm in Houston area, by the way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm up in Dallas, so yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening.
I think I have to log off now, so I don't know if we're gonna end it or if I'm gonna make one of you guys the host.
I think we're probably okay to end it. Yeah, I don't know. But thank you guys again so much. I really appreciate y'all.
Yeah.
Good luck
Thank
with it,
you.
Ray.
Good luck.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.
See you.
See ya.